people come with very, very good questions, which are like, well, I want to know what group of users are using this frequently. I want to know if what I shipped actually improved based off of the baseline that happened yesterday. I want to know how many X, like objects, charts, like transactions, X, like whatever thing that is really important. How many happened last week? I want to know how many happened today. I want to know last year, was there a spike in activity or number of X increasing in a holiday? Those are just so, I think, natural to like people, humans, to ask about anything that they're building. However, the translation of that into actually the execution of things is when things go wrong. So step number one is just like, well, how do you translate that to the data that currently exists in your system? How do you know that if that thing is actually instrumented, or if you're using an auto track tool, what label, what human, I think, tag did you put on it for you to recognize it? And number three is like, okay, like you get through all those steps and you finally create this chart that you're ready to share. And like I figured out like 50 people did 5 transactions in the last 50 days. And then the data team comes in and it's just like, well, like, were you using the right segment? Like, we don't care about those customers. I think you accidentally included like some of your people from your own company. And then that's when people start getting demoralized. And I think that's when people are like, that's hard. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. The data team has all of the answers to the questions. And so I think that's the journey, I think, of a lot of people. But I would say that like the first step, so many people don't even understand in the market. Just like, no, like all those questions that you're asking, that's all that data is. It's just getting there. And then like whether or not your conclusion is right is where the problem stays.
Hi everyone, welcome to Growth Mates, the place where we connect everyone with inspiring leaders from growth, product, and design to help you grow yourself and your product. In this episode, we had a conversation with Jenny Chang, interim head of design at Amplitude. Jenny shared her incredible 6-year growth story at Amplitude from IC to director. Together, we discussed the key challenges we faced during these career transitions, shifts in the mindset we had to make, and what helped us along the way to maintain personal well-being. In the second part of our conversation, we dove into the Amplitude story and the importance of data in the hands of designers, engineers, and how to make it more accessible for the entire team. We also talked about the role of data in decision-making on leadership level and how to keep data-informed muscle with you along your growth. If you found it valuable, please share it with your network and leave us a good review on Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to katesuma.substack.com to receive all episodes and more growth insights right in your inbox. So now, let's dive into the episode. Hi, Jenny. Welcome to Growth Mates. I'm so happy to have you here today. How are you doing?
I'm super excited to be here. I've been looking forward to it the entire week.
Oh, that's fantastic. I remember our first conversation actually, and when I met you, I just looked at your LinkedIn profile, and I was so surprised to see that we both have so similar journeys. And you joined Amplitude as a senior UX designer, and over time you grew and became a head of design these days. And this is great. I counted 6 titles, I think, over your 6+ years in one company. And this is also quite inspiring, I think, how you managed to grow consistently and being dedicated to one company. This is why today I was thinking to talk to you about this topic of how to grow, how to transition from IC to director, also being in such an interesting product-led growth company. And we will also talk to you about data topic, of course, and how to stay data-informed and who should be data-informed in a product team.
I really want to echo that back because when I saw your profile, I was like, oh my gosh, she's the same woman at Miro that like I am at Amplitude. It was so crazy. I think it's really rare these days to have someone be at a company for this long. And then like, I'd say that over the course of the 7 years, I've had existential crises about should I stay here? Is my career progressing as quickly as it could be if I were at a company versus like if I were somewhere else. And then I think after it got past like year 5, I was like, you know what? I'm not, I'm here to stay. I'd say that one of the thoughts that I wanted to talk about too was just simply what keeps you at the company. And I think we were talking about this the first time we met. And I think one of my first realizations was, I think, year 2 in, where I don't think I could go anywhere else without a data culture. And I would say that the primary reason that has kept me at Amplitude for this long is that we care about instrumenting our features. We care about our data rituals. And without data, I just don't know how I would be able to survive as a designer at another company. So I've been scared to give up, I think, our bread and butter here.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think you've mentioned that you found this motivation in culture, which is very interesting, in data-informed culture. And was there anything else that helped you stay loyal to one company? What actually created for you this motivation on the go year from a year?
Yes. So I have a coach that I've been using throughout the last couple of years, and the thing that we workshopped is like, what are the principles and values that you hold really dear? And does this job still keep providing you those principles? Does this environment, does this community provide that for you? And I distilled it down, and I think this is where it differs for a lot of people, but I value community first and foremost. Like, I love not only my friends at work, but the network, the knowledge, I think the shared relationships. And I think trust is really difficult to build from scratch. So I'm reluctant to give up any of the trust that I've built with the people that I work with on a day-to-day basis. And that was really illuminating for me to kind of like distill down. And then the other one is novelty. So I was thinking about it in terms of learning, but it wasn't simply the ability to acquire skills or to be taught something new. It's everything around, I think, newness. So it's just novelty in terms of what products are we building, what processes can we enact, what new, I think, ideas, or and a company's appetite for new ideas and new conversations. And Amplitude never, if anything, I think it could use a little bit of slowing down to actually distill and make these things higher quality, but I've never had any shortage of novelty here. So that's been really fun to go through. And then number 3 is, I think, is what I talked about, which is data. But like, I don't want data to be a principle at like other companies. I think it's more like evidence-based decision making would be how I would want that to be distilled into. So it's not just product analytics. I think it's research. I think there's a little bit of like grounding principles if you have something concrete that helps you make informed decisions. So those are the 3 things that are really, really critical to why I'm still at Amplitude. And I'm curious to know, like, what about yourself? Like what kept you at Miro for so long?
Absolutely. I will try to capture that, but like today, this story is about you. I don't want to take too much attention today, but I will be writing actually about my growth path at Miro from IC to become a leader in growth. And yeah, like I recently announced that I decided to finish this journey and open up to independent future. So this is where I am. This is why I'm also building Growth Mates. And I'm like so happy to hear so many repetition of the word data in this episode. And I think data is just in your DNA and probably in DNA of the company. And we will talk about that in the second part. Before that, I think it's very interesting to talk about this IC to manager to director transitions, because it's very complex. Sometimes it's very scary for other people to explore, and you've been there. And I'm very curious to talk about probably not the fancy part of that journey, but about challenges. And I can share mine as well. And I think we can do these discussions here together. And if you'd be willing to start sharing maybe 1 to 3 challenges that you passed through while transitioning from individual contributor to manager, that would be great.
Yeah. So in all of the different phases, I think of my career at Amplitude. Also, I think huge kudos to, I think, all of the leadership at Amplitude who supported me on this journey. I really could not have done it without, I think, the managers that I've had along the way, and then the leadership who saw something special within me and empowered me to be who I am today. And I don't think it's just from my perseverance alone. So like that, I just wanted to call that out. I think like a progression of career also depends on the support network. So that being said, I want to talk about the hardest transition that I've ever made, which was the first shift from IC to manager. And I think I've heard about this from like a lot of people about what step was the most difficult for them in their transition to head of design or a director of design. And for me, it was shifting the mindset from IC to manager. I think before fun fact is that I refused to be a manager for a very long time. I was like, it's like, I love designing, I love creating things. And as a manager, I saw poor management out there. And I experienced poor management before in my career. And I was like, I'm holding people's like psychological safety, and I could inflict so much pain, self-confidence issues if I do this wrong. Like, I'm not going to do this unless I take it seriously. And so it was actually a lot of leaders my manager, I think my design manager at the time, who was like, Jenny, like, just try it. Just do something. Like, you keep coming into this room with me every one-on-one is you being concerned about someone else's like journey at Amplitude, or like you want to go help them. I think there's like signals that you might be good at this job. And if you don't want it, you just scale it back. Let's put you in a player coach model. And then, so my first like transition was that it just took a really long, it took someone else to tell me that I need to do this. And then while in the role, it was really self-sacrificial. I think a lot of people talk about this, but like I would want high quality experiences while trying to manage first 2 people, which was like 1 person, and then 2 people. And then when it became 4 people and I was delivering, that was when I had another tough conversation. And this is why I think trust is so important, where my PM was like, Jenny, those designs are terrible. You are a great manager, and I think you need to just come to terms with what your prioritization is, not only in this work stream, but like in your life. And I took that, and that was when I made the formal, I think, official shift into managerial duties. But I just think that being a manager is so dangerous if done incorrectly. And I think the shift from an IC to manager was to realize there is so much greatness if you dedicate yourself fully to being a manager. And like seeing my team be successful is 10 times as rewarding as anything that I was doing as an IC. So that was my hardest jump, I think.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. And I think when I was thinking of my challenges, you just named a couple of them right away. So I think what you mentioned about the dangerous part of that, and I think it's important to design that as an experiment. And I always say like this approach when people ask me about these transitions. So especially if you are like in the design and the growth field, you know how to design experiments, right? So just design this experiment for your career and to understand how you will measure the success and measure your well-being as well while doing this transition, how you will iterate on that. And I think my challenges and some mistakes were in the beginning, it was very hard for me also to detach myself from hands-on work and start providing directions, not solutions, and keeping people accountable for that on design reviews. So to be honest, I was doing that mistake for a year. I was providing solutions all the time, over and over to my design team rather than direction. And finally, one of my direct reports just shared, like, hey, Kate, I just noticed that, and it was a new designer in the team. I just noticed that you're doing this, but actually I expect you to share a bit of more like direction, and maybe you ask the team about their opinion first, and then you share your ideas, because you can immediately share the solution. We all know. But what about asking the team first? And I was like, wow, this is so useful. That was the most useful feedback I have ever received in a year. And I just swapped the approach on design reviews, and I started first asking the whole team to share what they think. And in the end, I just summarize and I just share the direction, not the solution. And that just shifted the perspective. But like, by default, it wasn't working like that. Your mind is working in a different direction. You're just thinking about solutions, so you're talking about solutions, not about the direction. So yeah, I think that was one of the challenges I faced as well. And when you said that, I don't know, it was very interesting example that your manager delivered your feedback about your designs and said, like, do some prioritization, and you decided to actually prioritize managerial role and path. That is also interesting, because I think it was Julie Joe who mentioned in her incredible book, like The Making of a Manager, that it's tricky to balance AC responsibilities and management. If you do both, you will probably fail at both. So it's very hard to do both at a high bar of quality. So it takes a little bit of courage to let go some of the things you really love, but then it gives you fantastic opportunities to lead the team and to measure your success is the success of the team, as you said. And it's just beautiful. And let's maybe talk a bit about this mindset shift. So what were some of the dramatic mindset shifts that you had to make in order to become a good leader and grow as a leader? Because you are not a manager, you're already a head of design. So how to grow further from just a manager to become a head of design in a company?
Yeah, so that is a fantastic question, because the first dramatic, I think, mind shift was a people pleasing. I think this is a common one, but as an IC designer, you just become very, very nuanced in how you stakeholder manage. And it's not, you shift from people pleasing to stakeholder management. And it's just like, yes, like I really like what you're saying, but we're not going to do that right now. We're going to do something else. And then one of the shifts with stakeholder management, I think as a manager, is confrontation and being like, what you did was inappropriate. This is why, and this is what its effect was on me and my team. And then that shit from stakeholder management to like a little bit of intentional, I think, feedback confrontation. That was like a really rocky one for me. And like, it's not so much like confrontation as it is, I think, naming the theme in the room so that you can build trust again with like that individual and also the team member that you're supporting, protecting, insert like supportive adjective there. But that, I think, while we were doing that, or while I was going through that, that was a growth for myself, not just in terms of like the professional work setting, but I do think like becoming a manager affected who I was outside of work too. I'll tell you a funny one about a mind shift during that time, where that was when I got married, and then me and my husband were living in our first house together. And then I would take that tone from the professional setting and then take it back home. And he was like, excuse me, I am not one of your reports. So I think it was also just like, oh, wait a second. There's like different modes that you have to go in depending on the situation, the people, and the adaptability. The different mindset shift is recognizing that everyone is different. And again, Julie also mentions this in her book too, but it surprises me every single day when I manage new people or I interface with people that they're working closely with. And I'm like, oh, that didn't work with that person. Like, gotta scale it back a little bit, gotta like pivot and like do another experimentation. I think the third thing that I want to say is that I love what you called out earlier, which was experimentation. I do think, I don't know if it's just like successful brainwashing on Amplitude or like, or anything, but that has now become like a motto in my entire life. Like, oh, if I want to do something, try just a little bit, see what happens, like understand what its effects are, and then use those learnings and then like make the next move. And like, and it's to the point where I'm like, this is how I design my rooms. This is how I plan trips. This is how I think about like cooking these days. It's just so fascinating.
Yeah, I love that. Experimentation is in DNA, not only data.
Yeah. Yes.
So maybe before jumping into this data topic and like, talking in depth about that, let's think about the managerial transition that we already like touched a little bit, is how to maintain your actual like well-being while you're growing from one role to another, from one managerial role to another, and what supported you along the way, what helped you to maintain your well-being, because probably there were some, like roller coaster chapters in this transition. At the same time, talking to you today, you seem to be happy, energetic. It's very nice to have a conversation with you. So it feels like you did some also job in order to maintain your actual well-being at a high level. So anything that helped you?
I'd say that in the first transition so the first most difficult one was IC to manager, but then manager to director was difficult, but then it was difficult in a different way. And I'm really happy you brought up well-being, because that's when you kind of have to accept that the prioritization exercise inevitably ends up on tasks that you don't perform well on. And that was really difficult because I think I try very hard in producing quality and every single thing that I want. I just think that that's a really important principle that I have. Like, I want to show up as a full person. I want to be intentional. I want the artifacts that I create to be meaningful. I want my conversations to move the ball along, just generally. And then, and when you start getting more and more responsibility, scope, people to manage, projects to push forward, some of those have to give. And I took that burden on myself a lot. I would say like 2 years ago. And then what that ended up happening was I stopped working out. I was eating terrible food. I was working really, really late into the night. And then, when I wasn't working, I was thinking about work. And then I think there was like a little breaking point where I was like, oh no, like this is like nothing medically went wrong. But if I realized like at that moment, if I had kept going like this, it would actually be bad for all the outcomes I want to drive forward, as well as longevity of just like a happy life. And so since then, it's just acknowledging that like, and this is where I got like very nerdy about this, like the podcasts about nutrition, and then the working out, and then the sleep cycles, and then the like body optimizations. I think this is why it's so popular in the tech community, because I think everyone experiences this. I was like, oh, this is why people are so concerned about the sequence of like workouts and nutrition that go into their diet, because like how else then can you be sharp and be present in all of the conversations that you're leading? So and so now I'm like, I think my health is my number one priority, and my career is actually second. And turns out when I made that prioritization shift, it actually was better for my career. So like, that was also a very interesting learning myself. And because like if I made that shift, I realized I started having levels of like where I wanted to be very good at, where I wanted to just functionally complete an assignment. And then number 3 is just kind of like, what is the least prioritized thing on the list, and are you okay with letting that stay there? And then having that delineation meant that these are clearly the most highest impact things that not only benefit me, but my team as well.
This is wonderful. And I see how this managerial transition really helps you and helped everyone who've been there probably prioritize things better, not just at your work, but also for your life. And that, like, setting these clear priorities, like health first, career second, is just fantastic. I think it's a good skill to have in your life. And yeah, thanks for sharing your story. I think, yeah, it will resonate to many people. It resonates to me. And I really support other leaders who are really trying to take care of themselves. And I think it's a great example. It's exactly lead by example sort of thing that I think leaders should translate to the teams, so they will start taking care of themselves. So this is great. You said, this is interesting. I just listening to you, I see so many things in your vocabulary that are probably from this DNA, Amplitude's data DNA, like body optimization. This was so nice. It's also about this data-informed approach, right? So if you see like something is wrong with your health, you see that, you sense that, you collect some data, and there are so many beautiful tools right now to collect that data. And Amplitude is actually famous for its approach to evangelizing data and product-led growth across different functions in the product. However, I feel there is still a stereotype that data is only for data analysts, and all other roles and functions, they should just consume it maybe on a very, very high level of abstraction. And in your opinion, based on the mission that you're trying to translate at Amplitude, who should use data and analytics for their work, in your opinion?
Oh my gosh. I feel so strongly that it's everyone. Like there's no question about it. And I say this with a little bit of a caveat, because I think it's not easy to become data informed. And we learned that, I think, with every new person that we onboard into our company, and we've seen that in our user research. And I think what's really interesting is that it surprises people when I articulate like what is actually the most difficult thing about becoming data informed. A lot of people don't even want to touch the tool. And a lot of people don't even really want to get started. And I'd argue that I think it's the easiest step to get started. It's actually, if you ask, and we do this frequently in our user research calls or our focus groups, if you ask someone just an intuitive question, like, what do you want to know about your product? People come with very, very good questions, which are like, well, I want to know what group of users are using this frequently. I want to know if what I shipped actually improved based off of the baseline that happened yesterday. I want to know how many X, like objects, charts, like transactions, X, like whatever thing that is really important. How many happened last week? I want to know how many happened today. I want to know, last year, was there a spike in activity or number of X increasing in a holiday? Those are just so, I think, natural to like people, humans, to ask about anything that they're building. However, the translation of that into actually the execution of things is when things go wrong. So step number one is just like, well, how do you translate that to the data that currently exists in your system? How do you know that if that thing is actually instrumented, or if you're using an auto track tool, what label, what human, I think, tag did you put on it for you to recognize it? And number three is like, okay, like you get through all those steps and you finally create this chart that you're ready to share. And like I figured out like 50 people did 5 transactions in the last 50 days. And then the data team comes in and it's just like, well, like, were you using the right segment? Like, we don't care about those customers. I think you accidentally included like some of your people from your own company. And then that's when people start getting demoralized. And I think that's when people are like, that's hard. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. The data team has all of the answers to the questions. And so I think that's the journey, I think, of a lot of people. But I would say that like the first step, so many people don't even understand in the market. Just like, no, like all those questions that you're asking, that's all that data is. It's just getting there. And then like whether or not your conclusion is right is where the problem stays.
Absolutely. And you've mentioned that this tricky moment is happening when maybe stakeholders and data people don't understand each other or don't speak the same language. And maybe there is some demotivation, like when they are trying to solve the same problem, but they just don't know how to connect, how to collaborate efficiently. And do you know, or did you see any examples of how these stakeholders and data team can collaborate efficiently? And maybe there are some rituals or best practices you'd like to share.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I think this is also very meta because there's like a lot of different overlaps between the data community and the design community, which is really, really interesting. And the way that I think we've learned about it through our customers and what we're trying to build was that, well, why not leverage some of our design processes into data processes? And we've seen that from data teams that we've studied, and I think people who have successfully created a positive interaction. So using, again, this parallel is that there are design cultures that are super rigid and super, super, I think, militant about what can or cannot be shipped in the product. And you know what? What that gets is a more accurate and far more like beautiful results. And like you're able to lock down exactly what elements are going to be used within a design, and for data teams as well, the exact events and segments that you're supposed to use within a system. However, there's like another version of a design culture, which I am a bigger fan of, and this is the type of design team that I really want to work at / create within an organization, is a collaborative one, which is, hey, let's host design reviews. And like, hey, like, why don't you show a chart, a design at its infancy? Here's a wireframe version of it. Here's like a mid fidelity. Here's a high fidelity. Let's get some experts in. Let's get some stakeholders. And like, we can all talk and make this interactive. Let's host workshops. Let's host brainstorming sessions. And then at the very end, as like when you do have something polished, it will have feedback being created from all other people helping you build this analysis. Like an analysis isn't so different from a design. You're creating something with your team. It is capturing a business objective that you want to accomplish. And you also need to iterate on it being the most accurate and like beautiful analysis, beautiful design that we need to serve the audience that it's designed for. So the happiest collaborative design teams out there makes this design process less intimidating. Like, make your first chart. Oh my gosh, like that's not wrong. What you need to do is like, you need to think about that we care about our enterprise users because of this way. So you want to use this cohort of people. We care about our starter organizations. You want to use this cohort of people. And having that being an invitation, office hours, workshopping is the only way, I think, in my opinion, to kind of democratize data. Like, I think it's very human the way that we should be thinking about this process.
And I assume like designers at Amplitude are also quite involved into understanding why certain things didn't work or how things are moving forward if you launch something. I just listened to the episode with Elena yesterday where she is sharing this story of introducing self-serve monetization, and when you launched these several tiers and were observing for 1 day, 2nd day, 3rd day, a week, and nothing happened. So no purchases, nothing. People are not buying Amplitude's self-serve. And I assume like designers, they also have this visibility and attachment to these situations and problems, and probably like also keeping an eye on this data when these things are being launched. And I think data helps to create this shared responsibility because you have certain expectations or targets. You understand what you are measuring, so you feel a little bit more curious about that and attached to that. But is it like that at Amplitude? And what helps you kind of connect people to data even more inside the team?
Yeah, so I think that is a great, topic to bring up, because what are the rituals that we have to talk, see, interact with the share outs that we have, with all of the charts and everything that we create. So I think in every single team, there is a metrics tracker type of meeting. So at like a high level, all of our leaders go into this room and then we share out all of the metrics that have happened across the different initiatives that are going. Then the PMs have their own review process. The designers have their own review process, although we could do a little bit more. I think recently we've been a little bit lazy, like not lazy, but just like we deprioritize that. With engineering, they have their own trackers as well. And then every single business unit has a regular, I think, like weekly check-in. And it's the same format where it's just, or the same thing as like a designer review is the same thing as a meeting. The bigger that meeting is, the more scary and performative I think those metrics trackers are. And then the smaller the group, the safer it is and the more casual that situation can be. So the way that the thing that Alina was talking about is that it was actually at a team level that it was shared ownership. And it was like, wow, like what's happening? What's happening yesterday? What's happening today? Who clicked on it? Like, let's click on that particular user. What else did they do in the product? Who else is like them? Can we figure out like what did they do before they purchased, or how come they just like left the entire funnel? And so I think like a lot of our conversations around data in the industry are like it's like a top down thing, but I think some of the most beautiful conversations are happening bottoms up. And like if you give it to the team, the kind of the glue that brings everyone together.
And about these levels, I think it's also interesting dimension to think about, because I noticed that sometimes high-level leadership have probably a little bit different type of consuming data and different data sets to consume. And sometimes what I noticed maybe with my journey of transition into a managerial role, I just became less attached to particular specific data. And maybe sometimes I even didn't have enough space to consume data. However, I believe for managers, for high-level leaders, it's still quite crucial to have access and to somehow organize data in their head like all the time. And you said like there are different levels, right? So fantastic data consumption is happening on like a team level where everything is super detailed and in depth. But how do you see that on a high level of leadership, how they should consume data and how they can still be up to date with actual data? And anything related to that, what you are doing at Amplitude to support this level of consumption?
That is a current conversation. I think that is a conversation that has never stopped at Amplitude. And it constantly keeps evolving. So I will quote, I think, our CPO, Justin Bauer, where he says it's like a KPI, or it's objective before key results. OKR. Yeah, why am I just completely blinked out. It's an OKR for a reason and not a like KRO for a reason. You really want to make sure what you're trying to accomplish before measuring. So, and we kind of gone through cycles where we accidentally became like KROs, and that's a dangerous place to be. I think the reason why leadership needs to value data so much is that measures the heartbeat of everything that you create. It is the baseline, and it is the pulse, and it is the pulse of like all of the new initiatives either. However, it's not so much like a one-to-one thing, because there are some, for example, within Amplitude, we have a very technical area, and it's called data management. That's where you are governing, that's where you're cleaning data, that you're transforming data, you're making it consumable for people using it in charts. And the weekly active users of the flows within data management are inherently different from the people creating dashboards and creating reports. And at one point, we almost, I think, measured the activity relative to each other. And then we started realizing, no. Like, if you're fixing a lot of data, that probably means that your data is broken. So, like, what are the types of areas within your products that should actually be used less frequently, or should actually be thoughtfully, I think, measured success? So then we kind of changed it and said, like, well, what is the percentage of data that's actually being used by a chart? And then that kind of I think evolution keeps happening at the leadership level, which is like, what is the most accurate way to measure the baseline, the heartbeat of our product? And like those conversations I find really fascinating because we're constantly trying to not make that meeting performative. Just like you'd never want to design a data meeting that being like, yes, we hit all of our metrics and they're perfect and they're all green and we are super happy. And it's just like, that's probably not real. Like there's probably like a true data, I think, articulation is that there's yellows and there's reds and they're like, hey, we're worried about this. Like, this is stagnant. Like we see this segment of users outperforming the other one, but we're really concerned about these group of users. You want it to be honest. So I think that's like the TLDR of like all the leadership conversations.
Absolutely. And finishing up this part of like data and data using and consumption and all of that, you've mentioned these meetings, right? And in my experience and from what I've seen, it feels like it's very hard to make this meeting highly engaging for the audience. If this is like traction meeting, you're just talking about numbers. Green, yellow, red are the most interesting dimensions you will see there. And then you will see a lot of numbers. And have you seen any examples, maybe from your customers or maybe internally, when these meetings are really engaging and what helps making them engaging? My assumption is like bringing a little bit of visual stuff will help to make them engaging. Not just showing the actual data, but showing the interface where you measured that data and what was happening there, and just showing this side by side could make these meetings more engaging. But what is your opinion on that, or what examples have you seen?
This is, I swear I'm not trying to like upsell anyone during this podcast, but I think it's going to be a little bit of a plug. We are just, I think, embarking on creating a session replay tool or feature within Amplitude. So I think when you're talking about visual representations of data, like that is the one dimension that I think is lacking in all product analytics tools. I think without that, the ability to visualize someone's journey as they're going through this as like a data point, that's like a whole wealth of information that we're just losing when we're evaluating what something's doing well or something's doing not. So I'm not really answering your question yet, but like to the first question, which is how can you make it more engaging? Yes, I think we've taken inspiration from a lot of people who have both tools, like product analytics and a session replay tool, where you can kind of see, oh, wait a second, can we actually bring up something that a user went through that mimics this chart? And then the best meetings are like, oh, wait a second, what is that? Like, that's a bug, that's a UX improvement that we need to make. And those conversations are so engaging. So I think bringing that feature in has kind of shaped our own processes internally. Obviously, we were dogfooding before releasing it out in the cycle. So we haven't figured out how to integrate it at the leadership meeting, but I think teams were like, oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting chart. Let's see what users are actually doing with it. So that's one mechanism. And now that we have both, it's really easy to just kind of like do it all together in one place. And then the other portion of it that makes it way more engaging is, I think, and I will be honest, I don't think we've made the leadership level metrics tracker meeting super engaging, but I think everyone is engaged because that's the only time you can actually see what other teams are doing and how their products are doing. So that in and of itself is really rewarding. I think the most interactive is when you go, I think, a level deeper. And what I do know is that our product operations team, so like the director of product operations, senior director of product operations, he's really, really concerned about the engagement of that meeting. So now he's developing processes, which is like, hey, like, while it's not in the metrics tracker, what are some wins? Like, everybody go around the table and talk about, like, what did your teams accomplish? Like, what are some cool things that you notice in the data? And that has kind of transformed, I think, the DNA of that, of the atmosphere of that meeting room. So I know, like, kudos and like compliments all the time always work for everyone.
I can imagine using that for also like design review sessions, for example, and iteration brainstorming, because if you have this data, and you have both qualitative and quantitative things like the interface itself and the data behind that. You can easily create iterations on the go with the team, just brainstorm them and think about how to run your second experiment. And I think it's super powerful. I haven't seen this tool in action, but our listeners maybe can check it out if they want. Anyways, Jenny, thanks so much for this conversation. That was super interesting and useful. I think I would like to ask you some questions in the last lightning round part where you don't have to think about that too much, but just say anything that comes to your mind. And maybe let's smoothly connect it with the last topic we discussed with this data and design world. What data question do you think every designer should ask their data analyst tomorrow or on Monday? Today is Friday, so let's say on Monday.
Great question. It is the most important question should be, who are my most engaged users and what else are they doing within the product? That's it. Like, and by any dimension, just like pick, like, is it by definition of a feature? Is it by definition of completing a transaction? By definition of just like someone experiencing the latest feature that you design? Just who are my top users? What else are they doing? I think that's a great place to get started.
I just assume that this question will create a huge request for the data team to run a regression analysis. So that should be used to design the activation metric, because this is so powerful question. Really, it can help the team uncover the reasons why the users stick to the product. And in the end, define the activation metric if they don't have this metric in place. So this will be a lot of job for data team to answer that question. All right. So second one, is there any data insight that really surprised you? It can be outside of your domain. It can be super random data, anything that comes to your mind.
I think I have Amplitude stuck in my head, so I think I will keep using it. We talk about personas using Amplitude product analytics all the time, and there is a subset of power users going to this one page over and over again. It was just like the craziest spike in traffic that we had seen. This is like maybe about like 3 or 4 years ago, so it was fairly early on in my time at Amplitude. And we just like didn't know who these people were because they didn't do anything but go to this page. And what this page is that it's an event stream of looking at people and going through their different actions. And I'm like, what is so great about this page? And you look in, and it's actually a support team. And there was a company that had purchased Amplitude just to troubleshoot with our user activity page. And that was that was when it just kind of blew my mind, like data is for everyone. And then in that group of users, there's also SDRs and AEs in that organization who are using that to help cold call people or to help them understand who to contact within the organization. And I was like, oh my goodness. Other tools have that. I was just surprised that they used Amplitude for that.
This is super interesting, yeah, and it shows how asking these questions and being curious can help you even uncover new segment of users and start optimizing for them. Why not? Wonderful. And maybe the last one is about the resources that you would like to recommend to our listeners that inspired you with one of the topics that we discussed today. It can be a transition to a leadership or being more data informed. So any books, any links, we will attach them to this episode.
Yes. I have a couple of, I think, my favorite books around data or materials out there, but I will give you some fun ones just to end the episode on. So the easy one is Julie's book, Making of a Manager. I think I read that book religiously. That was just, the messy middle is something that I reference daily. And because I can vividly see that little diagram, which is so exciting and then immediately terrible once you get started. And it's just and it's not that bad. As every project in the history of time. I really like also fiction books. So I will, bring up, a new book that I really loved reading There's like the fiction really takes you out of it. And like the reason why I like fiction books is because it still talks about creativity and novelty and all these things. And I think it's really important for designers to always keep that thread going. I don't trust people who primarily read nonfiction books. And so the one that I really recommend right now is A Land of Milk and Honey by C. Pam Zhang, I think. And that is just about this dystopian world out there. And it's just like, and she talks about a world where there's no resources. And it's just like, it's gotten me, and the way that she writes, I think, has gotten me to think about, I think, design in a much more intimate way. So like, I think all of those three things, always have a fiction book at your ready.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for this diverse list of different books. We will definitely share them and attach them to this episode. So where folks can find you? I assume it's LinkedIn, but now you're quite busy with your work. So what is the place where they can connect to?
Great. LinkedIn would be best. I am notoriously bad at checking my email, so the notifications are the ones that get me the most. And through LinkedIn, we can connect via phone. And so happy to reach out and happy to answer anyone who reaches out.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jenny, so much for being with me today. And I'm so happy to have you here and looking forward to sharing it with the community. Thank you for listening. If you found it valuable, you can support Growth Mates by sharing this episode with your friends and colleagues. Subscribe to our show on your favorite platforms and get all episodes to your inbox by subscribing to katesuma.substack.com. Let's keep growing together.